哇，这多好！这不是还来看这白天这 Conspiracy theorists believe HAARP is responsible for triggering earthquakes in enemy territories, like Iran, China, and rogue parts of Afghanistan over the past 3 years. But HAARP's startling potential doesn't end there. Some say it's linked to a strange phenomena occurring in our skies. In recent years, peculiar cloud formations have been appearing in the skies all over the world with increasing frequency.
I think most of us in North America have wondered at these plumes crisscrossing the sky in grid patterns, parallel rows, and the now familiar X's. And many of us have wondered what these trails are.
While highly speculative, some researchers suggest these strange cloud formations are another agent of weather warfare. They first appear to be simply contrails, coming from high-flying jet airplanes. But these trails linger in the sky for many hours, some for even an entire day, forming an artificial cloud. Some researchers refer to them as chemtrails.
Chemtrails are deliberately sprayed by high-flying U.S. Air Force tankers, dispersing chemicals into the atmosphere.
Will Thomas has authored a book about chemtrails. Since the late 1990s, he has worked closely with another journalist in investigating these strange patterns that appear in the sky.
We have an FAA representative, in fact, a high government official, a person we came to call Deep Sky, attesting to the truth and the reality behind chemtrails. He described this program of spraying chemical trails at high altitudes in so-called commanded airspace, where commercial flights are routed around and beneath tanker airplanes belonging to the U.S. Air Force.
The theory is that chemtrails are being used in conjunction with HAARP. By spraying metal oxides into the air above enemy skies, then directing ELF waves from HAARP to heat those metal oxides, the temperature of the sky is raised to more than 100 degrees Fahrenheit, preventing the accumulation of water vapor that would otherwise form clouds and produce rainfall. The ELF waves HAARP produces bounce off the ionosphere and are able to curve around the Earth over the horizon to the ground, making any point on the globe well within reach.
One of the dangers in spreading chemtrails is that it acts as a desiccant and further dries the air. In other words, these chemical particulates can dry up the atmosphere and induce drought.
Imagine the effects of chemtrails on the battlefield, causing extended droughts in enemy countries, drying up their resources, forcing surrender.
Observers believe experimental additives are turning these long lines of exhaust into chemical contrails. They call them chemtrails. They say it's all part of secret atmospheric tests, and humans are the unknowing guinea pigs.
There's no evidence for supporting that assertion.
Are some contrails more than normal fuel emissions and frozen water vapor? We call on witnesses from both sides. And experts conduct several experiments, searching for ominous substances and a final verdict as we examine the best evidence. Contrails have existed for as long as aircraft have flown. They normally occur when hot engine exhaust meets humid and frigid air at high altitudes.
So a jet plane flies through this cold atmosphere. It produces a hot exhaust that is mostly composed of carbon dioxide and water vapor.
This exhaust condenses into visible ice crystals. They form white streaks which can linger for minutes or hours. Aviation experts claim with increased air travel we're seeing more contrails. There's nothing more to it. But some people believe that the same aircraft can release experimental chemical additives in the air as chemical contrails or chemtrails. In this way, government agencies can either manipulate the weather or counteract global warming. But some people claim chemtrails are harming an unsuspecting public. Eyewitnesses and researchers who believe in chemtrails say that jet contrails don't vanish within minutes as they once did. They now linger and spread, sometimes for hours, forming strange, suspicious patterns. Rosalind Peterson is one of those believers.
It's not normal for us. It's a grand experiment.
Peterson lives in Northern California near San Francisco. At one time, she worked for the State Department of Agriculture. Part of her job involved being aware of environmental issues.
I first started noticing unusual contrails in 2002 when it was brought to my attention by a friend of mine. He took me outside of his office and we began to look at these persistent jet contrails.
Peterson thought she saw a connection between aircraft activity and reports of chemically contaminated water in communities throughout California.
There were unusual high spikes in chemicals and heavy metals. Barium, aluminum, manganese, magnesium, zinc. And I suspect that we're getting the pollution from something in the atmosphere that's being released.
Peterson became so alarmed about the chemical contrails that she formed an organization called California Skywatch, a group dedicated to clean air.
I started documenting what I was seeing. I took pictures on my breaks. I took pictures at lunch hour. I started to really get angry because our once deep blue skies were no longer deep blue. They would turn into a white haze, and they would turn into these man-made clouds blocking the sunlight.
Peterson discovered that she wasn't alone in her concerns. Hundreds of websites revealed that persistent airplane contrails had become a worldwide problem.
I started then to research internet sites and government agencies, the EPA, NOAA, NASA, the United States Air Force. I learned that there was a lot of atmospheric heating and testing programs going on. I learned that there was lots of equipment that would leave these type of persistent plumes and spray chemicals.
Will Thomas is an investigative journalist who believes that some contrails are part of secret atmospheric experiments. He's been writing about them for over 10 years.
This is a deliberate project to slow down global warming. These trails were appearing over rural areas, away from navigational beacons and normal air routes. They would appear for weeks at a time and then disappear entirely, only to reappear months later, unlike normal scheduled air traffic.
Thomas believes chemical contrails are an indication that someone is using jet emissions to engineer the weather and slow climate change.
The problem with chemtrails is that when we attempt to geoengineer and interfere with complex, interrelated atmospheric processes, we are in for unintended consequences on a major scale.
Geoengineering is the artificial manipulation of Earth's environment on a large scale. In the early 1990s, American nuclear physicist Edward Teller was among the first scientists to model an experiment that would address the issue of global warming. He speculated that aluminum oxide could be injected into the upper atmosphere. It would act like tiny mirrors and deflect a portion of the sun's rays back into space. Supposedly, it was never put into practice. But activists believe the government has revived Teller's theory with some dire health consequences.
Some of the literal fallout from this chemtrail project are these 10-micron particulates falling by the megaton on unsuspecting people, plants, and wildlife. Now, a human hair is 100 microns across. 10 microns is submicroscopic. It can impact our lungs, it can inflame our hearts, give us heart disease, leading to fatalities. So this material comes down randomly in invisible clumps.
Dave Dickey also believes in chemtrails. As a landscape contractor for a large city, he spends a lot of time out of doors.
Contrail development is different than it ever has been in the past. And I do remember one in January of about 2002, where the number of flights overhead were extremely unusual. The number of contrails in the sky was unbelievable. We're counting 40 to 60 flights. And out of those 40 to 60 flights, most of them left an incredibly persistent large plume which would spread out and cover the sky.
A landscaper, Dickey has to be familiar with the types of trace chemicals usually found in the environment. He regularly takes water and soil samples and has them tested.
There was some research done that claimed that aluminum oxide could be used to reduce global warming. And I thought that if there was any chance that aluminum oxide would be used in the atmosphere, that it would show up in precipitation.
He collected rain samples on days when he noticed heavier than usual air traffic and took them to a lab.
And I expected to see baseline measurements where aluminum would show up in precipitation at about 0.0093 milligrams per liter. Very small amount of aluminum naturally present in precipitation. It was 20 times higher approximately than what was expected to find.
Dave Dickey believes that what he captured was the fallout from chemically laden contrails.
I was really hoping that we'd find natural water samples. When I did find aluminum and barium, it's just another one of the indicating factors that something was unusual.
Theoretically, scientists can cool the Earth using chemical compounds placed in the upper atmosphere. But could other substances be put there for more ominous purposes? Military victory or defeat can depend on the weather. A commander who can control the weather has a weapon as powerful as any Air Force. During the Vietnam War, the U.S. military began seeding clouds along the Ho Chi Minh Trail to create floods and wash out North Vietnamese supply routes. It was known as Operation Popeye, and crews flew over 2,000 spray missions.
I was told initially by a friend, he said his brother was in the military service. He said when there is these heavy spray days, when there's lots of persistent contrails to keep his family inside, when they were outside exposed, to have them go in and take showers. And he couldn't talk about it. He couldn't explain more than that.
Looking easterly where we had nothing, 10 minutes ago. Say at 10:20, there wasn't anything there. See? Well, I don't know. They look cool. I can look in my cloud books. You tell me. So that was looking northwesterly, and now we're looking southwesterly.
The purpose of chemtrail aerosol. A.C. Griffith was associated with the National Security Agency. He carried a top-secret clearance, a cryptographic clearance, and in more recent times he was associated with the Central Intelligence Agency operations. He was married to a lady lawyer, judge, and his father-in-law was a Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of Virginia. He is with us today, and we want to say thank you very much, A.C. Griffith, for joining us to talk about the purpose of chemtrail aerosol. Thank you, sir, for joining us on the Power Hour today.
Thank you, Joyce. It's indeed a pleasure to be with you today.
Well, I must tell you, I think the listeners are going to get more today than they probably imagined, given the fact that you have some information that most people do not have access to, and probably information we would just as soon not know. However, knowledge is power, and we thank you for joining us, and I know that you have listened to the Power Hour in the past and have been very supportive of the activities and providing information to the Power Hour. Let's talk just as much as you want to talk about what your past experience was all about, sir.
I spent a couple days making talking points to make a guide map of how to present this to you. It is such a big topic. It's very difficult to know where to grab it to begin. Several years ago, I got a telephone call from Mike Blair at the Spotlight newspaper in Washington, now called the American Free Press. He asked me to help work with him on the story of the white trails coming out of the airplanes. And time has gone by. I guess that was 8 or 9 years ago. We actually got inside the program. We're the only people in the world that actually got inside of that program.
When you say you got inside that program,
the aerosol program, the chemtrail program,
you're talking about information on the inside of this program.
I'm talking about actually getting inside the program at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base where it's being managed.
Wow.
And we actually got into some of the people that were dissatisfied from within the program, and they divulged a lot of the acronyms and the purpose of the program and so on. And that's the only way that anybody could ever have broken the secrecy of this program.
Okay.
We know that people have died over this program. People have been hit to keep them quiet. And we know that other things have happened to keep people in this program. One of the key people that designed the aerosol, the barium salt aerosol, was set up by people in the Reagan administration and he's now sitting in federal penitentiary. They still go to him to ask him questions, but yet he is in the prison. That is a little unnerving, isn't it?
Yes, it is, absolutely.
That the man that designed the barium salt aerosol is sitting in a prison.
Well, it would sort of make sense. Now, before we go any further, let's just define what you believe to be the aerosol crime issue. I mean, just what is this aerosol that we're discussing? I mean, it comes out of aircraft, we believe, or we know, and that is the basis of a program that is set up to not do good to this country, but probably do harm. Now, I remember we had a couple of people on the program recently. You contacted me after that, and you said, Joyce, some of the information was accurate, some of it was inaccurate. But what we do know is there's something in the skies that should not be there.
The white trail is not coming out of the engines. It's coming out of aerosol units on the aircraft. In the very beginning, the early days, the aircraft were flying relatively low, 10,000 feet or below, and they were developing the program. They were mostly contract aircraft, mostly CIA aircraft. Now the program has been expanded, and commercial airliners have been outfitted with aerosol units that are controlled through computer systems and satellites to dispense a barium salt mixture. It's a mixture of barium salt, not coming out of the engine. It's coming out of aerosols. And we have checked on information. We do confirm that the name of the project is Project Cloverleaf in the aircraft industry. It is very secretive. It is the most secretive thing I have ever encountered. People have died over this, talking about it. I listened to your broadcast just a few minutes ago. The general was on saying that he is very patriotic and he feels compelled to speak out, and that's exactly the same way I feel. I am very patriotic. I was born before the Second World War. I'm an old guy, and I come from that generation and that mindset. This is my country, and I see my country being dissolved. My country is being destroyed right in front of my eyes, and the people are being hurt, and that's why I consented to be on your radio program today. I know you will remember that you've asked me many times to do this, and I've been very reluctant, but it's time. It's time to speak out and go public with these things.
Well, that is correct. I have asked AC to be on this program many, many times, and you do this, I think, with a considerable amount of risk to your own life, do you not?
Yes, that's right.
So there are people who have lost their lives, people who are now in prison as a result of divulging this information. Now, you were, as you say, very patriotic. You still are very patriotic, and you were doing this out of patriotism, out of love for your country.
As I know you are.
That's correct. That's correct.
You know, Joyce, I'm in Richmond, Virginia, just a few miles from the spot that Patrick Henry stood in 1775. He was talking to Thomas Jefferson, George Washington, George Wythe, and others in St. John's Church. And they were talking about the oppression coming from England at the time. And he was a little put out at them for not deciding a course. And he concluded his speech to them with, "I know not what course others may choose, but as for me, give me liberty or give me death." And I think we're approaching a time like that. Mm-hmm. Don't you?
Oh, absolutely. There's no question in my mind. I talked with you about a discussion I had with a military member who admitted to me, well, first of all, he did not believe that there was such a program. However, he was stationed at one of the bases where I knew some of the operations were taking place on this aerosol clouding or aerosol dispersion or whatever you want to call it. And I had him go to the person who we knew was in charge at that base at that time. And he did, in fact, confirm that the person that admitted to some of the information that we're about to talk about here, or that some of the information regarding this program. And he was so disillusioned when I talked with his military officer. He said, "I am leaving the military, Joyce. I did not believe you when you told me about Gulf War illness." And then he said, "I became ill. Then I found out the doxycycline was true. And then now I have found out about this spraying issue." And he said, "I can no longer serve the military." Well, let's talk about this subject of what the aerosol program is, and how you were able to obtain this information.
First, Joyce, if you will allow me, let me paint a picture, a time picture. At first, you may think it's not related, but you will see that it is related. So if you will indulge me just a minute.
The opinions expressed on this program are not necessarily those of the staff or the management or the sponsors. The sponsors of the
Well, breaking medical news now. A troubling new report from the Centers for Disease Control. Asthma rates rising dramatically over the past decade. And Dr. Mark Siegel is from our Fox News Medical Aid team, and he's joining us now, also author of the new book, The Inner Pulse, which we just wanted to get in there as well. Doc?
Thanks. How are you?
So why? Why asthma rates so much higher?
It's gone from 20 million to 25 million over the past decade. Asthma means overreactive lungs or inflamed lungs. Why is it happening? Air pollution is one possibility. More allergies is another possibility. Something called the hygiene hypothesis, where we're not getting exposed to enough dirt or bacteria when we're young, so our lungs overreact, our immune system overreacts, and we get asthma as a result. This is a very serious phenomenon. Asthma is a very scary disease.
You know, some of us, it's allergy season.
That's
so we're having trouble breathing maybe, or we're having certain reactions. How do you know when you really have asthma versus, you know, a really bad allergy?
It's a great question. The most important thing is, are you having trouble breathing, like you said? Are you wheezing? But you know what the most prominent symptom usually is? A cough. If you're having a chronic cough and you don't know where it's coming from, go to see your physician. It's very easy to test for asthma. And if you have it, we have the greatest treatments now that we never had before. All kinds of bronchodilators, steroid inhalers, medications that decrease the inflammations of the lungs. You can get easily treated. Exercise brings it on. If you're working out and you suddenly start to cough or have trouble breathing,
but that's not in order to stop working out, though.
No, it's in order to work out, but see your physician.
It's like the common cold, no cure?
No cure, but plenty of good treatments, and some of it's avoiding. If it is environmental pollutants, you can stay away from them. If it is allergy, you can treat the allergy. But one thing's for sure, we're not going to cure it, we're not going to prevent it, but we definitely are learning how to deal with it.
Without Advair, I don't know what I'd do.
After 2 days of emotional testimony, an FDA advisory panel decided late this afternoon that two popular asthma medicines, Ceravent and Foradil, are not safe. The fear? They may cause patients to overdose or delay treatment.
The concern for these drugs is that they may actually worsen asthma, rarely in some patients, to the point that actually a few patients have died.
The committee looked at medications containing two components, steroids and long-acting bronchodilators. Bronchodilators open up breathing passages that become narrowed during an asthma attack. Steroids lower the inflammation that causes the narrowing. The committee decided medications containing a long-acting bronchodilator must also contain a steroid. Ceravent and Foradil do not. After vigorous debate, the committee decided Ceravent and Foradil are not worth the risk for any age group. But they voted to allow the combination drugs Symbicort and Advair after hearing impassioned testimony from people like Ann Dorsey.
I handed him lifeless to the paramedics.
Ann pleaded that Advair has been a lifesaver for her son.
When you're having an attack, it feels like something is crushing your chest, and it makes it really hard to breathe.
Julian will be able to continue taking Advair, but patients taking either Ceravent or Foradil should talk to their doctors.
Well, usually when patients have problems with asthma, allergies, sinusitis, and especially asthma, the typical conventional response is to give them medications to inhibit their immune system, mainly steroids and prednisone. Matter of fact, it's the first line treatment that's recommended to treat people with those types of problems. Apparently, they must have created a name called Advair because it's a medicine called Ceravent and Prednisone, so you don't know that there's steroids in that medication. It's a spray that works every 12 hours. What it does is it dilates your bronchioles, gives you a bunch of steroids that you get systemically absorbed. Now, over time, you form less of your own steroids, or cortisol, that you need to fight off allergy. The best way is to get at the cause of the problem, use certain vitamins and nutrients, and you could shut off some of the allergic response and get people off some of these medications. I was on prednisone 20 milligrams a day for 2.5 years, so I know a lot about prednisone, and that was for a type of joint pain and inflammation. But the bottom line is get at the source of the problem, make your body more alkaline, less acidic, and eliminate the foods and chemicals that act as triggers, and you can get people off these medications that cause all sorts of problems down the road. Well, they have sleep problems. You put someone on steroids, they wind up having insomnia, inability to get REM sleep. They wind up with fatigue and drops in blood sugar. They wind up with chronic yeast problems and immunosuppression. These people wind up getting colds more frequently, needing more and more antibiotics, all of which never gets at the cause of the problem, and then they get stuck on the medicines like I did. There's ways to get at the source of the problem and pick lower risk, high gain approaches than pick these steroids that have lots of systemic problems with it, thinning of bone, osteoporosis, and a whole range of problems.
Quick relief medications, although really good to open up the airways, can also cause a fast heart rate, can cause some tremors and some signs and symptoms of anxiety. It can also increase blood pressure. So what we recommend to parents is if they have to use their quick relief medication multiple times in the day or multiple times in the week, then that's a sign of poorly controlled asthma. If controller medicines are prescribed because of poorly controlled asthma, that should be the mainstay of care, and really to use albuterol only when acute exacerbations happen. That can happen at the onset of upper respiratory symptoms, that can happen at the onset of allergy season, but those quick relief medications should be used only at those times when they're needed, and the controller medication used every day, so that the side effects of the quick relief medications don't become accumulated. So we know that children with well-controlled asthma who hardly take albuterol don't get the jitteriness and rapid heart rate and high blood pressure of those who have poorly controlled asthma because they have to use their quick relief medication very frequently.
Children in the U.S. make more than 6 million trips to their doctor or emergency department each year for asthma, when swollen and inflamed airways make it difficult to breathe. A new study in the journal Pediatrics says nearly 1 million of those visits ends with an unnecessary prescription for antibiotics. Guidelines for asthma management do not recommend these drugs for asthma flare-ups, but when researchers studied 60 million visits between 1998 and 2007, they found doctors recommended many of the children take antibiotics, even though their use was not justified. Study authors note that the worse the symptoms, the more often this practice seems to occur. They say that unless there is a coexisting bacterial infection, such as pneumonia or sinusitis, antibiotics should not be used. Overuse can cause drug-resistant bacterial infections. Authors stress communication between doctors and parents is key. For today's Health Minute, I'm Nanette Sosa.
I mean, we're not sure why all this asthma is happening. It could be food additives, it could be vaccines, it could be the ozone, it could be the environment, it could be obesity. We've been looking at all these factors.
Could be the medications, could be better water over the past couple of decades.
Absolutely.
Let's cut right through it. H. pylori is the name of the bacteria. For centuries, human beings were thought to have in their stomach naturally. But after the Second World War, it went in decline because the medications got better, the antibiotics got better, as I mentioned, the water supply got better. So we started to kill that bacteria in the stomach. And now they think at a young age that bacteria could have been the key to keeping asthma under control.
Absolutely.
Do you buy that?
Absolutely, I do buy that. You know, we have been giving antibiotics to kids like it's going out of style. We may be wiping out this bacteria. And this is a reminder to doctors not to over-treat conditions, because you might treat one condition and make another condition worse. It's a big philosophical point here. You know, this bacteria, this study is suggesting that it may trigger the immune system in the proper way. And we know that allergy and asthma occurs when the immune system is triggered in the improper way. In other words, if you don't get exposed to this bacteria early in your life, you may have asthma or allergies as a result because the immune system goes haywire.
So take the conclusion of the study. How do we treat it then, doctor?
Well, the conclusion of this study is to not overtreat this bug. You could treat this stomach bug if you got ulcers, if you got gastritis, but it's never been shown that we should be eradicating this bug if it just happens to be there. You know, if you have ulcers in the stomach, Bill, you can get stomach cancer, and that's associated with this bacteria. But a lot of people are colonized with this bacteria, and maybe they should be.
Well, let's make that clear, because it can help younger people. It can be invasive for the elderly, though.
That's a very good point, because as you get older, you get more and more likely to get the ulcers or the stomach cancer. So I think the lesson here is stop over-treating young people with antibiotics with every sniffle we get.
Okay, just want to make this clear again. H. pylori in older people can lead to ulcers.
And it can lead to gastritis.
And stomach cancer.
Absolutely. And ulcers can lead to stomach cancer. They found 90% of ulcers have this bacteria.
All right, so if we're recommending to consider this for the youth, we also have to recommend this for the elderly. Do you test for it?
You can test for this, but the problem is that just testing for it on a blood test isn't always 100% perfect. And you're right to also extend this point to the elderly, because we may be doing wrong to the elderly. You know, there's a lot of asthma and allergies in the elderly now as well. So we should not be treating a bacteria. We should only be treating conditions of the stomach. So we should not be treating a bacteria. So we should not be treating a bacteria. So we should not be treating a bacteria. We should only be treating conditions of the stomach. We should only be treating conditions of the stomach. We should only be treating conditions of the stomach. Only be treating conditions of, only be treating conditions of, only be treating conditions of.
Like the common cold, no cure?
No cure, but plenty of good treatments, and some of it's avoiding. If it is environmental pollutants, you can stay away from them. If it is allergy, you can treat the allergy. But one thing's for sure, we're not going to cure it. We're not going to prevent it, but we definitely are learning how to deal with it. We're not going to cure it, we're not going to prevent it, but we definitely are learning how to deal with it.